That's how they are. If you're likely to conduct a survey, it's very likely that the results that you will receive are more or less the same as that. So that is not new probably for you guys, but the appreciation of the dynamics of these people is very important when you're trying to serve them. But now before financial services, it's very important within the financial sector, which you guys operate, is to ask yourselves, can I serve this person? So there are core enablers within want to serve them. To start off, we'll look at the literacy levels. And what we literally did in this survey, unlike other surveys, is not ask people, can you read or write? Was literally conduct a test and ask them to read a statement and write the answer. So if you look at the Swahili one here, what we asked was, unapenda chakula gani? Andika jibu. And from that, so we have an English version, but becomes different, where we find question there, and the question says, a person has 50,000 in cash and spends 13,000 on food, 8,000 shillings on clothing, how much money is remaining? So what we were asking was non-numeric questions. This is what you could call everyday mathematics. So I want to see if this audience could answer this question. So do we have our click? Of us, but you can go forward and answer. You now have 15 seconds. The results are just in. We're done with it, so I hope you got it right. So the results for this question are as follows. Apparently, what about the people we serve? So what proportion of them got it right? So 90% of you got it right, but what proportion of the people that we serve got it right? And the results are as follows. That was a subtraction question where 59% of them were able to get it right. What is the difference between the results that we got in this room as people that are designing products for these people and the actual competencies of Tanzanians out in the market? As you can see, there's a difference between us and the people we serve. So I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that we are serving a population that is slightly different from who we are. But these numbers are very important. What you realize from the results that we are showing up here is that Tanzanians are more likely. Of course, we know 8% of us were not able to answer the question correctly. But yeah, so let's move forward then and read documentation. But to start that, you're not owning. So the first you leave on. So what we found out from the results is that so 1% on land. But when you look at that 43% that on land and ask yourself, if you look at the total adult population, what proportion of them claimed to have approved or show that 5% of them have a proof of ownership? But when you move deeper and ask that entire group, what proportion of you have a title deed? So we're only discussing Tanzanians that have, 3% of Tanzanians have a title deed. Most of them, out of the 10, from the village head. But a very small chunk has 3% of them have a title deed. When we move to the panel, we'll have discussions around this particular issue, but start thinking about it. And then you'll see some correlations when we move forward with the amount of people who are borrowing from formal financial institutions. And are there other channels that are also operating in the market that give us a different perspective? The regulators would always require that you know your customer. So that's very crucial when you're offering financial services to consumers. And then the question then here becomes, rely on, because majority of our people have it, and I'll move that back again to the discussions that we'll have in this room. If we move forward, what we realized between 2009 and 2013 was that the jump, the fact that the main growth of access to formal financial services was driven by uptake of mobile financial services. So we wanted to understand this core enabler that could allow you to receive mobile financial services. What proportion of the population have it right? So the first thing we did, again, as we mentioned, the survey used mobile data collection. So we used a very A simple method of trying to assess whether there was network connectivity in the enumeration areas that we visited or not. What we found out is that 95% of the places we visited had network reception. Then we went to the second piece and asked the respondents, do you have access to a mobile phone? 93% of them say they have access to a mobile phone. When you look at this, remember the old days when we all had to call the post office for us to get a connection to a friend. So we've shared phones in the past, and there are people who are saying have access to. Closer to the people is to ask yourself, do individuals have connectivity directly? And what the results show us that is 63% on a mobile phone, but another 4% have an interesting dynamic here where they slice in the SIM card into phones. If we move forward then, now that all these things are there, the big question then becomes, is there a financial access point in my enumeration area? Or is there a financial access point where I live? Sylvia and Professor Arsami introduced what are called enumeration. The country split into small land masses with clusters of almost 50 to 100 households, on average 86 households. And what we simply did, as Sylvia had mentioned, is we randomly selected 1,000 enumeration areas. When we randomly selected the 1,000 enumeration areas, and this is just pockets of where people live, what you would want if you're trying to aspire is that in every 100 households, you have a financial access point. So we asked ourselves, is there a financial access point in all these places? What we found from the results, which is it's not what we've always tracked as a nation, was that 34%, which is not shown on the chart or on the map, had a financial access point within that cluster of 100 households. So you can think of where you live and think about your neighboring 100 neighbors around you, and it's that community if you think about it basically. But what is more interesting is in the past and how Tanzania always measures itself in around access to financial. Crucial, because then we believe that distance is set back in 2013, 2014. Then what becomes more interesting is to look at that. If you consider that to be 100, what you need to look at is the rural areas and ask yourself, is there a financial access point within 5 kilometers? The results are as shown on the chart. The darker areas had more financial access point vis-a-vis the lighter areas. So you can see probably the one that is lagging behind is the border, but we have an uptake of financial. Now that we've looked at demographics, people. And is it consistent? So you look at the different channels through which they generate.
After that, and we know how rent issues are in this. I leave it for. Is can you think about something you want? The survey results, as you can see here, show that people would want 1%.
And then we ask them, are you struggling? And statistically, there's not a huge difference. 51% are struggling with regular expenses. 48% are struggling with regular expenses. If you look at the distribution across, the struggle is real. Half of our population is struggling. So you have to look at them like that. And as you're trying to serve them, what does it mean? What are the conditions that you tag along with the solutions that you offer them that appreciate rather than control? They are running out of money. They're more likely to cut down. They're less also argue that there's a lot of in-kind details that we've not gathered in this survey. So they might be farming, and because most of us are subsistence farmers, what we farm we eat, so we're less likely to cut down on our meals. Or we already are stable with 2 meals. They borrow from out there. I am struggling, and it's a quick thing. still go to a brother family. Is sisters, can we when you give he or she can't pay it back, what happens? So should we give our relatives, call this kin tax, and which is very crucial if you think about it. So you'll always, it really comes back to like, yeah, I just give out money. In reality, that money never comes back to you. So if you move forward, if you want to serve people and you expect them to be planned and organized so that they can results show us is that when we ask them if they keep track of what they receive and spend, 77% say that they keep track. But when we go to the specific details, 50% say they know how much money they spent last week. And if I throw that question at you, because that of that 8%, I wouldn't throw it back at you to answer how much you spent last week, but it is a struggle. And you look at that difference, 27% difference, so they are not keeping track, if you look at that. So half of the population is not. So are there financial tools that could help them keep track of their monies, if you think about it from that perspective? If we move forward and ask ourselves, how do Tanzanians age 55 and below plan for retirement? When I get to 55 years and I'm less active, what will happen to me? The masses here, as I said, 2% that sits at the bottom and you're comfortable. But as a matter of fact, people, a quarter of them have no plans. Another 20% are planning to go to farming, agriculture, livestock. Another 18% to savings. But we love our children. We love them, we'll educate them. Backing it up, if you look at it from that perspective. And I'm just about to get done. The last two things that we look at is, why are people saving? So tunakuuliza, kwa nini unaweka pesa aside for you to, why are you saving? Why are you setting aside money? And what the survey results show is that 82% are saving for cash flow smoothing, cash flow management issues. So it's just, you want your cash flow to be smooth. That's all I'm trying to cover. I'm covering my basics. Are they setting aside money for investment in productivity? Only 9%. And that's what you want people to start thinking about. I'm going to become productive. But if you notice, if the fundamentals are not very clear, people are just surviving. You remember the struggle? So people are surviving. And this is the people we are supposed to serve. We need to appreciate this and work around it for us to serve these people better. Asset building is low. But when we move to borrowing, what we've realized is there's a slight jump in the proportion that activity. People are likely to borrow for investment. Cash flow smoothing. Save.
And you also look at literacy. Financial literacy is one thing, but even general literacy. When you're talking about 15%, no formal education. We have to craft products and innovations to meet basic needs that 15% of potential customers have no formal education. Out of that, 25% can't read or write Kiswahili. Hawezi kuongea wala kuandika wala kusoma Kiswahili. Asilimia 25. 25% is a very significant number. And that is, I think, very, very important. One of the other issues that came out, lack of consistent incomes. Another issue, the urban-rural divide. When you're looking at a situation whereby in rural areas, 84%. When you look at the urban areas, it drops down to 19%. That is very, very important. Commercial Bank, Ms. Irene Isaka, Director General SSRA, I think it's represented by Dr. Karina Wangwe. Dr. Karina, please welcome, and Elvis Mushi. Please, to the panel.
We're in a place that's better. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. in a blue, you got a fast car. I got a plan to get us out of here. I've been working at a convenience store. Managed to save just a little bit of money. Won't have to drive too far. Just cross the border and into the city. You and I can both get jobs. About to see.
Also, having people who are really, and we do have Dr. Sylvia Meku, who will be representing the National Bureau of Statistics, and we have Irene, represented here by Dr. Karina Wangwe, and you can tell I'm favoring the ladies because I am a lady. On the young side, we do have to have them, and we start with was quantiles, whereby we saw a lot of people in that. What do you think when we have the financial service providers in this room, what that information they're getting from such a message that was presented to us by Elvis? I would take...
Thank you, Dr. Blandina. Yes, it's true that the population which was surveyed, the first two quintiles represents a larger population, whereby this population do not have access. They have access, but using the financial, in which Elvis, it showed that 80% of the all. So what does this mean in the financial sector? It means that
not my target, then I don't have an answer for that. But if they are, then the second question is, how do I get close to them before I even think about the product? Is the accessibility? Do they have access to products? And that is another question that banks would think. What is the cost of meeting them? Obviously, brick and mortar is out of the way, given that we now have technology. So brick and mortar doesn't answer it effectively. Tanzania is a big country. So the issue here is, how do I allow access to these people? But now I was looking at the Tanzanian of the study. They did not put in one expenditure called entertainment, and basically it's alcohol. There's a huge expenditure on alcohol in the villages. That was not captured by their survey, but I don't know for whatever reason, but that's there. Then and you need to understand that the type of product will depend on the type of need of the consumer. So I think these are issues that would arise for those who wish to.
Thank you, Mr. Ringo. Welcome, Mr. Israel.
Thank you. I think the results show huge opportunities for the banking sector. What is needed is to use these results to carry more research which are targeted. For example, we need to understand what kind of services, what kind of products. People say there is also the opportunity, to expand by using brick and mortar, but using technology. I think there's an opportunity to bring affordable products. Yeah, thank you. Using technology, I think there's an opportunity to bring closer to the rural population affordable products. Prominent in this research is that the number of, there are more women
Also, Professor Wasame said a few things about it. What was your reaction when you come to think about what are the policy interventions do you think like Tanzania should actually take, given also what the other panelists have said?
In terms of pensions especially, our preferred, I would say from the regulatory point of view, the preferred ID would be the national ID because of the wealth of information that it holds. Now, as you say, the survey comes up and says voters' ID is in use more. Again, this is an area where we need to...
It is an interesting ID. It's what we have now. So for short-term basis, it's what we can make use of. But more interestingly, what I would like us to think about is that guy who was 17 years.
A general, a universal kind of like ID. Now, there's the data that was shared here. Also, one of the things...
Yes, okay. Good morning to you all. My name is Ostenes Sambua. I come from Tanzania Entrepreneurship and Competitiveness Center and also Diligent Consulting Limited. And my question relates to, I think, combining what you say, the issue of title deed. But I'm looking at that group, the age 16 to 24, which is dependent. And they are likely not to have an ID. They are also likely not to have property. They are also likely not to have all those things. And I think most of these, especially in the rural areas, they are post-secondary school. So they don't have even a chance to go for further education. And they are maybe faced by a farm. And I would say that maybe they are, young, energetic, and restless, and worried. So from the ladies and gentlemen on the table, I mean, what innovations do you think we need to do with those facts? And I think it's a group that we need really to start looking at how we bring them to the mainland. Thank you.
And I was hoping, Sostenes, you were going to give us some ideas as how we're going to go about to include them. Yes, please. Zantel, who would like to take up on this question? Consultancy. Or any of the results that you've heard today. Because a lot of things that Elvis has been presenting here is saying we have to think differently. Apparently, we do have a big chunk of population that are still being financially excluded. All right, when we're still thinking about that, let me bridge and go to the other phase. But before that, anybody wants to react to source? Yes, please, Israel, Karibu.
Yes, that's a very good question in the sense that, say, the age group of 16 to 24, they don't have title deeds or some means to, in order to embark, say, on economic activity. And I mean, we must also bear in mind the fact that even if they have a title deed, it depends on the location. If it's the village, how can you sell that property in the event of default? So there are also some complications, even if the title deed is there. The way to support them is, first of all, you have to look at the character of the individual. Again, you need to do more research. But what is also interesting is that there are many other organizations which are looking to team up even with the banks in supporting, the youth in the rural areas. And to me, I think what is important is collaboration. We can start by collaborating, and then from there, once they gain the track record, you can win them off, from that kind of maybe grouping, and then they can stand on their own. There are many budding entrepreneurs in the rural areas, but I think we need to go there as financial institutions to bring them out.
Great. Elvis, some insights?
Yep. So it's very interesting. Some of the work that we do is try to work close with these young guys and ask ourselves, so how do we ensure that we see things happen in their life? I think it's very important for us to recognize what is the role of financial intermediation. When people have big ideas, when people have bankable ideas, what is more important is that at that point in time, they should have access to probably a starting capital or something of that nature. The conditions at which these people are now make it very hard, not only in our market. So I think it's also across other markets that younger people are less likely to receive credit if you compare them to the others. But what have people done differently that we're not doing differently here in Tanzania is something that we have to be cognizant with. I think there's a couple of crowdfunding solutions that are out there that I'm not seeing in our market that I think we should consider. Venture capital is something that struggles. I think Professor Asami should tell us how it has been. You've also tried to work in that journey and try to invest in ideas in this market. Are our people polished enough for them to be bankable, if you ask yourself? But even interesting enough is, I've also done just normal conversations. The interest for people to collaborate is very little. So as a young person, you have to appreciate the fact that on your own, you will not make it to become the richest guy in Tanzania. At your initial stages, you might need to co-opt people who could support you. And that sole proprietor mentality that sits within us blocks our minds and blocks our ideas from entering the market. So I think there's a role on both sides for, there's an...
I understand is that we have had problems in terms of identification. The reason why we have had problems basically, in my mind, is three. First is the way that it has been donor funded instead of initiative. And so politics of donor funding come in. Then you have where institutions are different. There's no coordination. So one institution wants to introduce this type of identification, the other wants this type of identification, and it becomes politics. But in normal places with other countries, institutions like NIDA usually take precedence in terms of identification. That is what we should do. We should have one identification institution, not more than one, because that brings politics. For example, Elvis was very clear here that somebody who's now 17, when they come to 18, may not be able to vote after 18.
And that is a huge game changer if you look at the access space. I'll tell you a story of some of the analysis we've done before using our 2013-2014 data. The data mapped 7,700 health facilities and asked what proportion of the population is within 5 kilometers of a health facility. The results of that was 44%. At the same time, we mapped the financial access points in Tanzania, which were 120,000 by then. The results, 58% of Tanzanians were within a financial access point. The difference between 7,000 and 120,000 is huge. But then the question becomes is, where are we placing our agents? And I think that really matters. Where are we placing our branches, banks? What defines our financial access point placement strategy? I think we will be undertaking an initiative known as the Financial Services Registry, whose entire responsibility is to ensure that we have a sustainable mechanism of identifying where financial services are offered. And that really makes a huge, huge, huge difference. And if you also look at it, it's also very important for you to understand that some few places are likely to be left out, because if you look at probably one of the channels that we look at as the key driver of access to financial services, if you look at it from the mobile financial services, just network reception by itself is a service. So is the intervention moving an agent there, or is the intervention moving the network there? So those are some of the things and dynamics that we have to think about while trying to serve our people. And at times the solutions that we need to bring into the market, or we need to have to adjust our situation, might not necessarily even be from a financial service provider's perspective, you know.
Thank you very much for that. And I was looking at Mr. Israel, given his extensive experience, given what Elvis has just said, and I like the way he took the networking discussion. In most cases, when we are having talks around financial services, access and uptake, one thing that we tend to talk about is the infrastructure. The way Elvis has put it, I would like to hear your views, in particular with regards to the role of infrastructure when it comes to financial services access. Please.
The infrastructure plays a key role in determining, where one can provide financial services. Some of the areas which have been mentioned, I was in Songea recently, and one thing which impressed me in that area was the road network. That is quite easy to move around, in the rural areas, and as a result, I think it's also easier to establish, service points, if you want to establish service points. And another thing which also influences infrastructure is the economic activity in particular areas. If you look at where there is high concentration of financial providers, as presented in the report, places like Kilimanjaro, Ruvuma, and so forth, I think it also tallies with the economic activities taking place there, especially in terms of farming. Those are the areas where there's a lot of farming activity taking place. And as a result, the infrastructure becomes much easier. Apart from that, I think the infrastructure must also be tallied in the sense that you must have various services in one center. For example, you was talking about the medical facilities. It attracts people to one area when they're trying to when they're looking for services.
The flow. So we did touch a little bit more on the demographics and addressability, and less on the gentleman. Okay, let me see all the hands, and then. Okay, so we're going to. I will start to the another gentleman at the middle, and then I'll come here and there. So please start with the gentleman at the back. Yeah, it's working. Yes, please.
First of all, my name is Hussein. I'm heading the mobile financial services in Tigo. Thank you for the outstanding work and for the excellent presentation which you've seen today. It's absolutely enlightening. It's not a question as much as it's a comment, specifically on the demographics. I'm personally a big believer in the youth, and in the time I was here in Tanzania, I engaged with a lot of youth in the age of 16 and more, and maybe even less, and I can see that they come with huge energy. The only difference is they come with a really big entrepreneurial mindset when compared to the older generations. So this is the key difference. The youth at that age, they are exposed to more entrepreneurial ideas, and they are really looking forward to make it happen. So I think our success and the way we have to act to be more customer-centric and suit their needs rather than ensure that they fit in our platforms. So this is something important. If we do that, I'm sure they will bring a lot of good projects, number one, and that will be in the best of Tanzania and best of their own, number two. So I think this is very key for all of the players in the financial sector to start suiting and tailoring their products to fit in the needs.
Yes, please. There's a mic next to you.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Yusuf Abdi. I represent Abana Bank Limited. First of all, we want to thank FISCOP for this sustainable financial inclusion. And from what I gathered from a good presentation by Elvis, based on the demographics, addressability, and the financial behavior of the Tanzanian population, I think in the Elvis highlighted on the significant population of the Tanzanian who survives with less than $1. Then if you ask me as a financial service provider, how can I crack that? It's going to be very challenging task. He also highlighted on the significant portion of the Tanzanian population depending on the farming. Then we ask ourselves, what type of farming are these people depending on? Is it a modern cultivation or is it a traditional? And what are the sustainable income on that type of farming? So again, if you ask me as a financial service provider, how can I crack that? It's become a very challenging. So what I'm trying to say is that if we really want to crack the gaps in the financial inclusion, then let's focus on eliminating that economic inequality which exists.
Thank you very much.
From the individual level to the general level. And I would like to hear from specifically the panel and the BOT delegates on their involvement, their roles in ensuring that those macroeconomic elements, they support to reduce that economic inequality so that we can have a very significant portion of the Tanzanian in the financial sector.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Serapia Mgembe. I'm coordinating the Property and Business Formulation Program for Tanzania, known as Mkurabita. I have two comments. One comment is specifically for Mr. Israel. And Mr. Israel made a comment in the first round that when we were talking about the 3% of people who are owning land with titles, only 3%. And the reaction from Mr. Israel was that even if they own, I mean, we have so many people with titles, but the location of the land is in places where you cannot sell that land. Now, this reminds me of the work which Mkurabita is doing. Phase 4 of Mkurabita is capital formation and good governance. Capital formation in the sense that we are making people who are owning land, making people who are transacting businesses use their assets to grow more money, to make more wealth. Now, when you tell me that you cannot, I mean, it's maybe not meaningful because the location of the land we cannot sell. When we started doing this business, really we struggled so much to discuss with the financial institutions and in the use of the CCRO, the Certificate of Customer Right of Occupants. And one of the reasons the banks wanted not to give loans to people who are owning CCROs is because land with CCROs cannot be sold. The law does not allow that land to be sold. But when we discussed with them, one of the comments which we were making to them is that we are sure that the work of the financial institutions is not to sell people's property. I'm sure it's not the one. So if that's it's not your work is to make sure that the money which you give to people comes back again, it goes around and down so that you can save more people. So we said, let's sit down together. Let's agree on how we make these people who are owning land which cannot be sold, who are owning land which are in very remote areas and we cannot sell it, see how we can help them. And in those areas, Akiba Commercial Bank or Postal Bank, we say let's sit together and make a tripartite arrangement. We have the financial institution here, we have the person who wants to get a loan here, and we have Mkurabita on another angle. So we have these three angles. Say, let's give us responsibilities. You as financial institutions, you give loan. You as an individual who want loan, you make sure that you use that loan accordingly and pay back the money. And we, as on behalf of the government, we make sure that we all the time just push that individual who is taking the loan. Discuss with the bank if there is any elements of default. But this has seen to be very beneficial and practically possible. So instead of just losing heart and say we cannot do this, let's sit together. If you have that opportunity, just call us. We can sit together and see how we can save these people. Because over 90% of our people are there. So if we say, you know, they are like this, we cannot save them, maybe we are not going to do justice to them.
Thank you very much for that practical experience, really. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yes.
I said I had 2 comments.
Can I please allow one? Because we also have to allow the members of the panel to react.
Okay.
And also we have another exciting presentation coming up.
It's fine.
Yes, thank you so much for your comment. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Abdurrahman Said. I'm the head of financial markets for Standard Chartered Bank Tanzania. Just want to go back to the initial observation that Elvis discussed, and you briefly mentioned around the title, how the 3% of Tanzanians hold the titles on land. So I think that calls for innovation around, in the financial services industry. So you correctly mentioned banks will require title deeds. If you look around a lot of other countries, Kenya, China, India, they will have platforms that are developed by fintech. The existing financial services that we have, for example, banking, microfinance. And if I can have a comment or two from the regulators in terms of how are the regulators aligning to support, the various innovative ideas that could come from the young generation that my colleague from Tigo mentioned, to support these ideas that could actually help in financial inclusion, in increasing financial inclusion in Tanzania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I pick a gentleman, I'll have to pick also a lady. So I better see a hand of a lady, then I pick you. If I don't, I'm just going to turn to the panel. And unfortunately, I didn't, so I'm turning to the panel. You all have 30 seconds to react. Sorry, that was a joke. I'm just running out of time. Yeah, sorry. We're just running out of time, so please, sorry. Yes, please. I'm going to start the way we started. So Sylvia, then Karina, Dr. Israel, Dr. Ringo, and we will wind up with Elvis. Final words in 30 seconds. Karibun.
Thank you, Dr. Blandina and members. I would like to react on question number 2, which was a comment. It was a comment about youth. And myself and on behalf of the NBS, we really recommend programs which have innovation geared to capacity youth, because this group is a big group, and if we have proper policies and proper products for this group, I think we can improve the financial inclusion in Tanzania.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, Dr. Karina.
My comment is on it was a question on the role of a regulator. And I would say from the point of view of SSRA, but also echoing some words I had before from Professor Ndulu in another setting, regulation always runs behind innovation. So I think that innovation will happen. It will happen due to market forces. It will happen due to demand. We don't have to look to the regulator to push, to drive innovation. They will not do that. However, the regulator will look at what's happening, look at the risks, and come up with some ways to support the innovation. So financial services providers, back to you. Innovation is in your hands. You should start.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Israel. Yes, please. Yes.
Yes. To the issue raised by
in 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, borrowers. But most importantly, another aspect is we should invest in training the potential borrowers, so that they understand their obligations and their commitments, so that we have a higher return in terms of.
Mike, please turn on the mic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have just three points. That the population we are looking at is illiterate, is not as literate as other people. I think the media that we use to communicate should change. It's not be reading and writing. It should be, the visual media rather than reading and writing to get the message across, one. Secondly, the other group that we have excluded is those who are over 60. I'm seeing youth, but those who are over 60. And the question is, why do they don't use financial savings as in part of their pension? It's because there's too much inflation and too much devaluation that eats into money that people are not very secure with using financial products. They'd rather go for real estate and other things. And finally, even then in Tanzania, how many people live long after 60? Very few. So they would rather eat it now than wait it for it. Finally, I think the delivery should move from an elitist approach, we have an elitist approach, to a more reality approach for youth, for products that those actually what they need and not what we think they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ringo. Elvis?
So I just have 2 points. The first one looks at the financial service providers. I can't re-emphasize the need to really understand that the people we're serving are very different from us. And the products that we offer them and the conditions that they come with are not for the population that we intend to serve. I'll give you an example of an innovation in Kenya that I was informed by my friends from Busara. Simply, they have recognized that people will be paying loans late, so they've removed the late fee. What does that mean, And some of those are the things we need to do to allow more people in, for us to allow the fluctuations and inconsistencies in people's incomes. To the regulators, we understand the conditions of our people. It's very, very clear that they are different. Probably the providers are not responding as they're supposed to. For instance, they still sell products to us with interest rates. Can we say that whenever you bring out a product, I really like Nasoro, the money lender. Did you hear him say percentage at any point? Nasoro continuously said, tampa $300,000, atanirudisha $325,000, anarudisha $350,000. Nasoro hakuongea percentage. Nasoro aliongea pesa na lugha ya Mtanzania. Kwa mimi nadhani kuna mchango from both sides, the regulator, but even the financial service providers, to just understand the common man.
Thank you very much for this. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me and give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much for making this a lively discussion in the first panel, and I hand it over to Professor Wasame.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blandina. Thank you, panel members. Much appreciated. I think a few things have come out, although we have had an opportunity to listen to the panel, but I'll ask everybody to take advantage of our tea break, which is coming up, to have a more in-depth discussion. This launch is supposed to create interactions, raise questions, challenge us in coming up with new innovations in serving the market. I'll just point out a few things. When Elvis mentioned no late fees for paying loans, I think that worried me a little bit. The moral hazard is still there. If you tell people you are not going to charge them for late, I don't think that is an innovation. That's probably an invitation for them to pay even later than usual. I think that is something to watch out for. But I wouldn't discourage, if anybody wants not to charge any late fees, you're welcome to try it out. Maybe you will last a month, maybe 2 months, who knows. The other issue I think has been mentioned, and I really need to emphasize the issue of titles. A very good economist, Peruvian economist called Hernando de Soto, did a lot of work on inclusion and how to uplift people. And one of the key issues was land ownership. Without the foundation of land ownership, to uplift people out of poverty was extremely difficult. His work was very, very clear. And please use the lift or the stairs, and let us try to be back within 20-25 minutes or so. But in the meantime, while you're getting tea, please interact with everybody else and raise as many questions as possible. Thank you very much.